So I want you to think back to a time recently um, when you stepped into a completely new arena.
Right, like a big life change.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you took on a senior role at work.
Yeah.
One that you'd been fighting for years. Or you packed up and moved to a brand new city where you literally didn't know a single person.
Or even something personal, like getting married or having your first kid.
Yes. You step into this new reality, which, it's supposed to be this huge triumph, right? But almost instantly, it feels like you've completely forgotten how to be a competent human being.
Oh, absolutely.
You just plunge into this intense anxiety and self-doubt.
Yeah.
And it's wild because it's not like any of your past achievements have been erased. So why does that happen? Like, why do we feel like we're failing or moving backward the second we transition into something new?
Well, it's actually a universal thing, and it's a deeply disorienting psychological phenomenon. We've basically been conditioned to view our lives and just the whole concept of success itself as this continuous, unbroken upward trajectory.
Like a straight line pointing up and to the right on a graph.
Exactly, a straight line. So when we hit that inevitable wall of anxiety and incompetence in a new environment, our immediate conditioned response is to just panic.
We think we're doing something wrong.
Right. We think we're losing ground, or that, our previous successes were somehow just a fluke.
And that illusion of losing ground is kind of the core myth that we're dismantling today.
It really is.
Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack a framework that entirely re-engineers how we view human development, how we learn, and really the architecture of our society as a whole. We're looking at the work of educational framework designer Christo Becker.
And we have a really fascinating stack of sources from him today.
We do. We've got excerpts from his UP presentation, some really deep cuts from his books, Assessment, Evolution, and Curriculum and Flow. And of course, the overarching geometric model he calls the Diamond A Spire.
Yeah, and Becker's framework is essentially an intervention. It's for a society that has honestly diagnosed itself completely incorrectly. We have this pervasive, almost invisible assumption that success is a rigid pyramid that we have to climb.
Right, and at the top of that pyramid is just relentless competition.
Exactly. But Becker suggests that reality is actually an upward spiral. By mapping out the true human experience through his diamond model, we can see how we are biologically and psychologically meant to fluctuate, between learning the ropes and mastering our environment.
And more importantly, this model corrects a massive societal misconception about what it means to be a warrior.
Yes, it exposes the warrior archetype not as the peak of success, but actually as a trap.
Which is wild because we romanticize the warrior relentlessly.
We really do.
We think of the cutthroat CEO, the hardened politician, the person who just destroys the competition. But before we get into why the diamond model places the warrior at the absolute bottom of human development, we kind of have to look at the map we're currently using.
Right, because you can't really understand an upward spiral if your brain is locked into flatline thinking.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about that flatline thinking.
Well, it requires looking at the invisible operating system running our modern world. The sources identify this as Newtonian thinking.
Like Isaac Newton.
Yeah, but when we talk about Newtonian mechanics in this context, we aren't just talking about physics. We're talking about a worldview that emerged during the Industrial Revolution. It views the universe as a giant clockwork mechanism.
Okay, so very rigid.
Very. In a clockwork universe, everything is linear, everything is separate, and every action has an equal and opposite reaction, which translates socially into a zero-sum game of competition.
It's that assumption of linear causality.
Right.
A causes B, which causes C.
Exactly.
If I pull this lever, that widget comes out. And that works beautifully if you are, building a steam engine.
Sure, for machines, it's great.
But Becker's work points out that we took that machine logic and applied it to human beings. We applied it to education and global economics.
Yeah.
We basically forced a relational world into binary logic. Right or wrong, pass or fail.
And the linguistic structures we use actually enforce this flat reality too.
Wait, really? How so?
Well, Western languages predominantly rely on a subject-verb-object structure. The actor acts upon the object. It's a one-way street.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that grammatical architecture makes it incredibly difficult to intuitively grasp feedback loops or situations where the object simultaneously changes the subject. Our language literally biases us towards seeing reality in two dimensions.
That makes so much sense. And that two-dimensional bias gave us what is probably the ultimate artifact of the corporate world, the Gantt chart.
Oh, the Gantt chart.
Anyone who has worked in an office knows the trauma of the Gantt chart. It's that visual project plan with all the tasks cascading down the vertical axis and time just marching relentlessly across the horizontal axis.
Right, and the underlying psychology there is that if you just follow the prescribed steps in a straight, uninterrupted line, you're guaranteed the perfect result.
But Becker's framework exposes this as a complete illusion when you apply it to complex human systems.
It is, and Buckminster Fuller's philosophy is highly relevant here. The author actually brings him into the text for this exact reason.
What did Fuller say?
He observed that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you have to build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete.
I love that quote.
It's brilliant. And the Gantt chart model is obsolete because it belongs to a world that no longer exists. It was built for a slower, heavily buffered, and highly predictable environment.
Which, post-2020, we definitely do not live in.
Not at all.
The sheer volume of information flow now, the integration of AI, instantaneous global supply chains. I mean, this reality doesn't behave linearly, it behaves relationally.
Exactly.
You pull a lever in one sector, and instead of a widget coming out, a completely unrelated system on the other side of the planet reshapes itself.
Which brings us to a really crucial systems insight from Becker's work. We often assume that because the modern world is vastly more complex, we need a vastly different, impossibly complicated logic to manage it.
Right, like we need some super algorithm.
But complexity doesn't require a different logic at scale. It requires the same logic held coherently from the micro level to the macro level.
Okay, unpack that for me.
So if your foundational process, like how a single human learns or acts, is based on a broken straight line, scaling it up to a multinational organization just creates a massive, fragile, broken straight line.
Okay, let's bring this down to the micro level then, because there's a brilliant analogy from the sources about baking.
The baking analogy is perfect.
Right. Think about the physical act of baking a cake. If you applied Gantt chart linear thinking to baking, you would read the recipe once, dump literally all the ingredients into a bowl at the same time, throw it in the oven for exactly 40 minutes, walk away, and then wait for someone to grade you on whether the cake is edible.
Which is a recipe for a disaster, not a cake.
Obviously. Anyone who cooks knows that the actual process is a continuous feedback loop. You decide what you want to make, you gather ingredients, you start mixing. But then you taste the batter.
Right, you adjust.
Yeah, you realize the flour you bought is a bit more absorbent than usual, so you add a splash of milk. You check the oven temperature because it runs hot. You pull the cake out, test it with the toothpick, maybe put it back for 3 minutes.
It's all relational.
Exactly. You taste the final product and make a mental note, like less sugar next time. Assessment isn't an endpoint where you are judged. It's continuous diagnostic feedback right in the middle of the action.
And that feedback loop is the essence of what Becker calls the process cycle. It's an 8-step loop. Define the task, plan, develop, do, assess, reflect, learn, and character.
Okay, so assess is in the middle there.
Yes. The most radical shift here is redefining assessment. In a Newtonian system, assessment is an autopsy. It happens after the fact to determine failure or success. In Becker's relational system, assessment is the heartbeat. It keeps the organism alive and adapting.
So here's my question. If this continuous process cycle is the natural way we operate in our kitchens, or, when we learn to ride a bike, why on earth did we design our schools, our economic policies, and our corporate hierarchies to look like rigid brick pyramids?
Because historically, pyramids optimize for control.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. When resources are scarce and communication is incredibly slow, a society prioritizes control and predictability over adaptability. A few people at the top of the pyramid dictate the linear steps for everyone else below.
And that worked for a long time, right?
It worked for centuries to build physical infrastructure. But that rigid architectural mindset caused a massive misinterpretation of how human beings actually develop.
And this is where we need to look at the geometry of the Diamond Day Spire itself. Because this model replaces that pyramid with a diamond, and it maps out 4 distinct stages of human development.
Right, the 4 colored diamonds.
Exactly. So we have the athlete, which is represented by the red diamond, the warrior, which is the gray diamond, the statesperson, the green diamond, and the spirit, the blue diamond.
And the crucial correction Becker makes here is architectural. Like in passing conversation or even in casual readings of developmental psychology, the warrior phase is almost always listed second.
Yeah, people usually think you go from athlete to warrior.
Right, it's treated as an evolution of the athlete. You train, you get strong, and then you go to war. But when you look at the actual visual blueprint of the diamond A spire in the source material, the gray diamond, the warrior, sits at the absolute bottom of the structure.
Which is huge. It is placed below the red diamond of the athlete.
Yes.
This flips our entire cultural narrative upside down.
Right.
Because we idolize the warrior state. We put it on magazine covers. The aggressive venture capitalist fighting for market share, the relentless trial lawyer, the political operator battling for dominance.
We celebrate it.
We do.
So,
But Becker's model says this isn't an advanced state of human achievement at all. It is a baseline crisis state that we have to evolve our way out of.
the gray diamond has to sit below the red diamond because gray represents a society organized entirely around historical scarcity. It is the realm of traditional politics, traditional economics, physical limitations, and deep social divides.
So it's basically survival mode.
Exactly. The framework is careful to point out that these structures aren't inherently malicious. They were evolutionary necessities for a slower, more dangerous world where resources were strictly finite. But if we treat the warrior state as a step up in personal development, we are romanticizing a state of perpetual crisis.
We end up romanticizing survival mode. And you can see the friction of this everywhere today, right?
Yeah.
Look at the structures built on gray diamond logic, traditional economic models, highly partisan political systems. They are universally buckling under immense pressure.
Oh, without a doubt.
Whether a person leans left or right politically, the fragmentation is undeniable. We're seeing inflation, supply chain gridlock, extreme polarization. And the diamond model isn't taking a political stance here at all. It's impartially observing that these linear zero-sum structures are cracking because they're trying to contain a highly connected relational world.
It's a phenomenon described as pressure-revealing structure. These massive systems didn't just suddenly break over the last 5 years. The accelerated pace and connectivity of the modern world simply revealed that their rigid, linear architecture lacks the capacity to adapt.
To use a tech analogy, it's like an outdated operating system. The gray diamond isn't evil. It's just Windows 95.
That's a great way to put it.
If you try to run a massive, modern generative AI program on Windows 95, it's going to freeze. The hardware isn't malicious. It just fundamentally lacks the architecture to process that much dynamic information.
And that translates perfectly to the psychological level, too. What does it feel like to be a human being running on Windows 95? Like, what is the internal experience of being trapped in the gray diamond?
Well, the sources offer a brilliant linguistic twist to explain this. The warrior diamond is actually more accurately described as the worrier diamond. W-O-R-R-I-E-R.
The shift from warrior to warrior captures the internal decay of that state perfectly, I think.
Oh.
The gray state is driven entirely by ego, self-interest, and the illusion of separateness. You view yourself as an isolated unit in a hostile environment. Consequently, you are consumed by anxiety.
Because you're constantly on the defensive.
Right. You are trapped in an endless loop of comparing your success to others, and you frantically accumulate material trophies to basically prove your right to exist.
And this is anchored in Malthusian and Darwinian assumptions. Thomas Malthus ingrained in us this fear of absolute scarcity, the mathematical terror that there will never be enough food, land, or money to go around.
Yes, the pie is only so big.
Exactly. And the social interpretation of Charles Darwin gave us the doctrine of survival of the fittest. It framed life as a predatory random lottery where you literally must eat or be eaten.
If your foundational belief is that resources are hopelessly limited and everyone else is a potential threat to your survival, becoming a warrior is the only logical outcome.
Yeah, how could you not be anxious?
Exactly. You spend all your energy fighting external pressures. You fight the economy. You fight your coworkers for promotions. You fight social marginalization. You are operating in a state of severe emotional and psychological debt.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate and challenge this model with reality for a second. Look at Wall Street, or the hyper-competitive spheres of Silicon Valley. Some of the most financially and culturally powerful people in the world seem to operate entirely within this cutthroat, zero-sum, gray warrior state.
They do, yeah.
They're ruthless, they're scarcity-driven, they're highly territorial. If gray is such a miserable bottom-tier trap, how does the model explain their massive accumulation of resources and success?
That is a really vital distinction to make. The diamond model doesn't deny that the gray state can hoard material wealth. In a system built on Newtonian logic, those who master the mechanics of extraction and competition will naturally accumulate the most capital.
Okay, so they win the game as it's currently designed.
Right, but Becker's framework distinguishes between material accumulation and systemic sustainability. The billionaire operating purely in the gray state may have endless resources, but their internal architecture is incredibly fragile.
Because they're still warriors.
Exactly. They're still driven by the warrior's anxiety. There is no amount of wealth that cures the fear of scarcity if your operating system is built on the premise that you must continually conquer to survive.
Wow, yeah.
The text acknowledges that survival mode, acting as the warrior, is sometimes briefly necessary. But living perpetually in that state, even if you are technically winning the material game, leads to personal burnout and eventually societal collapse. A society just cannot sustain itself if its most powerful leaders are terrified, competitive warriors.
Because they'll eventually consume the system itself to protect their position.
Precise.
Okay, that makes total sense. The wealth is a buffer, but it doesn't change the underlying operating system. So how do we actually upgrade the operating system? To escape the gray trap, the framework says we have to move up into the red diamond. We have to become the athlete.
And stepping into the red diamond requires a profound shift in orientation. You move from a posture of defense to a posture of action and learning. The athlete phase is entirely about learning the rules of the game.
Right.
You learn them internally, mastering the mechanics of your own body and mind, and you learn them externally, mapping the parameters of your environment.
And the vocabulary used to describe our world undergoes a massive upgrade when you move from gray to red, which I found fascinating in the text.
Oh, the terminology shift is huge.
Politics is no longer about fighting for territorial power. It becomes vision, a shared direction. Economics stops being the hoarding of scarce resources and becomes exchange, recognizing that value actually moves through trust, collaboration, and knowledge. The physical environment is reframed as context, acknowledging that our digital and social spaces shape our behavior just as much as physical walls do. And the social milieu becomes evolution. We stop seeing our identities and social roles as fixed, rigid categories and recognize that we are continuously adapting.
To understand the mechanics of this adaptation, Becker connects the red diamond to Bloom's taxonomy.
Which is the foundational framework for how humans acquire skills, right?
Exactly. The text meticulously breaks down this progression. In the red phase, we start at basic perception, just noticing the environment. We move through guided response, eventually reaching a state of habit, which Bloom calls mechanism.
Mechanism, okay.
And finally, we reach adaptation, where we can alter our habits to fit unpredictable situations.
In the athlete stage, you are still seeking approval through achievement, though. You want to win the game. But unlike the gray warrior, who is paralyzed by a defensive fear of the future, the red athlete is future-focused and oriented around learning.
Yes, you aren't just surviving the environment, you are actively training in it.
The practical examples in the text ground this theory so beautifully. Consider the psychomotor domain, which is the process of learning a complex physical skill. The primary example they use is learning to drive a car.
Oh, that is such a visceral memory for most people.
It really is. When you first sit in the driver's seat, you are in that initial guided response stage. You are hyper-aware, clumsy, gripping the steering wheel until your knuckles are white. You have to consciously think about every single mirror check, every millimeter you press the gas pedal, and how to coordinate your hands to turn the wheel.
It requires immense cognitive load.
Exactly.
But through the process cycle, acting, getting feedback from the car's movement, and adjusting, you reach mechanism. The actions become a habit. You can drive to work without consciously thinking about every turn.
You almost forget how you got there sometimes.
Right. And the pinnacle of the red state is adaptation. You are driving, and suddenly there is a massive downpour, or a child runs into the street. You don't have to consciously recall a textbook on physics to react. Your body and mind adjust automatically to the new context. You adapt.
The text also applies this to the cognitive domain, using a fantastic classroom example that shows the difference between gray and red education.
I love this example.
Imagine a grade 3 lesson on paragraph writing. In a gray Newtonian classroom, the teacher says, "Read a paragraph," sets a timer, collects the papers, and hands back a grade of 60%.
Just a final judgment.
Exactly, an autopsy. But in a red relational classroom, they use the process cycle. The teacher defines the task clearly. Write a 5-sentence paragraph about a pet, like Max the dog or Whiskers the lazy cat.
Right, and the teacher provides a model, engaging the students in guided practice. The crucial difference here is formative assessment.
Yes, assessment in the middle.
While the students are writing, the teacher's walking around, assessing in the moment. They might say, I see you have a great topic sense, but only 2 supporting details. What else can we say about whiskers?
And through that trial, immediate feedback and adjustment, the student moves from abstractly knowing what a paragraph is to actually internalizing the structure and producing it automatically.
It's a completely different way of learning.
Think about the psychology of mastering a piece of complex software, or finally nailing a difficult piece of music on an instrument. You go from that clumsy, frustrating friction to a seamless flow state where your hands just know what to do. That rush of competence is the pure energy of the red diamond. It is the joy of the athlete realizing they have mastered the field.
It is a deeply fulfilling state of active, engaged mastery. However, as rewarding as the red diamond is, it is not the pinnacle of the structure. A critical question arises once you master the rules of the game.
Which is what happens next.
Exactly.
Because if you just keep playing the exact same game over and over, solely to hoard more trophies and prove you're the best, you risk slipping right back down into the ego-driven gray diamond.
You become a worrier again.
Right. To continue ascending, you have to change why you play the game. You have to step up into the green diamond. You become the statesperson.
The defining characteristic of the statesperson phase is the taming of the ego. You transition from self-interest to a posture of service, rooted in gratitude.
The fundamental psychological shift is moving from the athlete's question of, what can I get out of this system, to the statesperson's question of, what can I give back to it?
Becker explicitly references John F. Kennedy's inaugural address here. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country.
That quote perfectly encapsulates green diamond energy. You are no longer fighting for basic survival, and you aren't just training to beat your own personal records. You are applying your mastery to serve and maintain the system itself.
Psychologically, this transition unlocks a state of authentic freedom and profound inner peace. You are no longer tormented by the anxiety of the future, which is the hallmark of the worrier, and you aren't strictly bound to personal achievement metrics like the athlete.
You enter a sustained state of flow.
Yes, flow. You find fulfillment in your contribution to others, whether you are a CEO, a teacher, or a parent.
Becker maps this green state to the affective domain of learning, which deals with our emotions, our values, and the heart. The progression he outlines is fascinating because it explains the psychological friction of why it's actually quite difficult for humans to internalize value. And he uses the example of a birthday party.
The birthday party analogy perfectly illustrates how we construct meaning. Let's break down those stages.
Okay, so at the lowest level of the affective domain, which is receiving, someone hands you a birthday gift. You are simply aware of it. The next step is responding. You open it and say, thank you.
And this is where a lot of people stop.
Yeah, unfortunately. But the next stage is valuing, and this is where the friction happens. You realize the person took real time, thought, and resources to choose this specific gift for you. To truly value it requires a degree of vulnerability. You have to attach sentiment to it, which means you now care about something outside yourself.
And that vulnerability is exactly why some retreat to the gray diamond.
Oh, because caring makes you vulnerable.
Exactly. Caring about a system means you can be affected if it fails. It's risky. But if you push through that fiction, you reach the highest levels of the affective domain: organizing and characterization.
Let's say that gift is a highly expensive, delicate new smartphone. If you have internalized its value, you don't just say thank you, you organize your life to protect it. You research and buy a protective case.
Right.
You build a habit of always keeping it in a specific, safe pocket. You set reminders to optimize its battery charging. You have completely altered your behavior to care for the object because its value is now part of your character.
That is the precise mechanism of the green state, but applied on a macro level. Instead of a smartphone, the object of your care is your local community, your team of employees, your family, or your academic field.
You've internalized their value.
You've internalized their inherent value so deeply that you organize your entire life to nurture and protect that system. You act consistently and authentically in alignment with those values.
It sounds like the ultimate endpoint. I mean, you climb out of the worrier trap, you train as the athlete, you graduate into the statesperson, and you just exist in this enlightened, peaceful flow state for the rest of your life.
It is a beautiful thought, but it defies the fundamental laws of nature. Life is not static. And this brings us to what I consider the most profound and actionable insight of this entire framework.
It is.
The true human experience is not about reaching the green diamond and planting a flag at the summit. It is about the continuous, unavoidable fluctuation between the red and green diamonds.
When I read this section, it fundamentally shifted how I view my own life. Becker states that the green diamond phase, that feeling of being a statesperson, of complete mastery and peaceful flow, usually occurs just before a transition into a new milieu.
Consider the chronological timeline of human development.
Right.
Think about a child at the very end of primary school.
Okay.
They are the oldest in the building, they know the layout of the campus, they know the temperaments of all the teachers, and they have completely mastered the social dynamics of the playground.
They are the benevolent rulers of the schoolyard.
Precisely. They are operating firmly in the green diamond. But what happens roughly 3 months later?
They enter high school.
In an instant, they are at the absolute bottom of a vastly more complex social and academic hierarchy. They do not know the rules. They do not know the layout. By crossing into that new milieu, they are thrown aggressively back into the red diamond.
They are forced to become the athlete all over again.
Exactly.
And this pattern repeats constantly throughout our lives. You graduate university and start your first serious job. On campus, you were a senior statesperson. You knew how to write the papers. You knew how to manage your schedule. On day one of your new job, you are a junior athlete who doesn't even know how to route a document to the office printer.
It's so true.
It happens when you finally master your role at a company, and then you get promoted to a management position where the required skills are entirely different.
Yeah.
And it happens most dramatically in our personal lives. You might have your career completely dialed in, operating in total green diamond flow.
And then you have your first child.
Yes. Suddenly you are holding a newborn, and you realize you have absolutely zero idea what the rules of this new reality are.
Understanding this fluctuation offers immense psychological relief. When you start that new job or move to that new city or bring that baby home, the intense, overwhelming anxiety you feel, it is not you regressing.
That is such an important point.
You are not slipping backward into the gray warrior crisis state. You have not lost your competence. You've simply entered a new milieu, which means you are back in the red state. You are back to learning the new rules, actively seeking feedback, adjusting to a foreign environment, and training as the athlete again.
It is exactly like the progression in a complex video game. You spend hours mastering level 1. You collect the upgrades, you learn the movement patterns of the enemies, you defeat the boss. In those final moments of the level, you are an absolute statesperson. You are untouchable. But the moment the screen fades to black and level 2 begins, you are stripped of those specific situational advantages. The terrain is entirely different. The rules of physics might have changed. You are at the bottom of the power rankings again, and you have to learn the new map.
And if you strip away the frustration, that learning phase is the actual joy of the game.
Totally.
If a game forced you to stay in level 1 forever, never introducing a new challenge or a new environment, you would quickly succumb to profound boredom and stagnation. The fluctuation, mastering a domain in the green state, and being humbled by a new one in the red state is the fundamental engine of human growth.
For anyone listening right now who feels overwhelmed by a recent transition, this is your reframe. If you're sitting at a new desk feeling like a total imposter or staring at a new life challenge feeling completely unequipped, give yourself some grace. You haven't failed and you haven't fallen down the pyramid. You are simply an athlete warming up on a brand new field.
It is a vital and empowering perspective, but it does raise a critical structural question regarding the diamond model.
Which is?
If we are constantly looping back and forth between red and green, learning and mastering over and over again, what prevents this from being a flat, repetitive circle? What is the force pulling us upward? What occupies the very top of the diamond aspire?
The peak of the structure, the blue diamond, the realm of spirit and quintessence.
The blue diamond represents the divine, or spirit. While those terms carry heavy theological weight, Becker defines this phase in highly practical, structural terms. It is our capacity to transcend perceived limitations. The blue diamond is where we access intuition, intention, inspiration, and deep integration.
To explain this, Becker brings in a quote from Nikola Tesla. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
A classic quote.
Initially, that sounds like a pivot into mysticism, but the framework grounds it in observable reality. It is about operating at a higher level of awareness and anticipation.
Becker terms this futures literacy. In the context of the diamond model, anticipation is not about predicting the future with a crystal ball. It is the creative, prepared response to change. It is the active shaping of possibility. The blue diamond acts as a gravitational force, pulling our red and green cycles upward into a spiral.
Because of that upward pull, The loop is never a flat circle. When you transition from a statesperson back to an athlete, you are not starting from scratch. You are operating at a higher frequency.
Exactly. Let's return to the parenting example. When you become a parent, you are thrown into the red diamond of parenting. You have to learn the mechanics of feeding, sleeping, and caring for an infant.
Which is exhausting.
It is. But you bring with you all the character, the resilience, the emotional intelligence, and the adaptability that you built during your previous cycles of education, relationships, and career. You are a novice parent, but you are a highly advanced learner.
That's a beautiful way to frame it.
The blue diamond ensures that every time we cycle, we ascend toward greater consciousness, broader awareness, and more profound service.
So we've spent a lot of time exploring this geometry on an internal psychological level. It's easy to see how this upward spiral works for a single human being learning to drive or navigating a career. But a human being is just a microsystem. What happens when we scale this up?
That's the real test of the framework.
Right. If this diamond pattern governs optimal human development, how do we use it to fix the broken, rigid macro systems we talked about at the beginning? How do we scale the diamond A spire to a national or global level?
Transitioning from the micro to the macro requires shifting our institutions from hierarchical pyramids to diamond-shaped coherent systems. Becker refers to this as moving from a hierarchy to a heterarchy.
Heterarchy.
Yes, a hierarchy optimizes for top-down control. A heterarchy optimizes for system-wide coherence.
Heterarchy is a dense term. Let's unpack what that actually looks like in practice. If a hierarchy is a traditional CEO-down corporate org chart, what is a heterarchy?
A great biological analogy for a heterarchy is a mycelium network, the underground fungal networks that connect forests.
Oh, wow, okay.
Or, technologically, the structure of the internet. There is no central boss of the internet dictating every data packet's movement. Instead, every node operates on a shared set of base protocols, a shared logic.
Right, they just follow the same rules.
Because the foundational logic is coherent everywhere, the network can adapt instantly to localized damage or surges in traffic without waiting for orders from the top.
And Becker provides 4 connection points, the 4 A's, to establish this coherence in human organizations. Awareness, anticipation, accountability, which is deeply tied to abundance rather than scarcity, and adaptability.
To see how this scales in the real world, the sources include Becker's preparation notes for a strategic partnership with the South African Department of Basic Education, specifically focusing on a leader named Louis Taylor.
Yes, I was reading this part.
This is not just theoretical. This is a case study of stress testing the diamond model in one of the most complex bureaucratic environments imaginable, a national education system.
Reading those notes felt like a masterclass in how to introduce paradigm-shifting ideas to massive entrenched bureaucracies without triggering their defensive reflexes.
It is a brilliant display of applied psychology. Becker notes that traditional government interventions function as conventional Newtonian projects. They operate on a Gantt chart.
There's that Gantt chart again.
Right. They ask a linear, isolated question. What physical input do we need to provide? The logic is, we have a literacy problem, therefore we need books, so we provide books. Project complete.
But the diamond framework asks a fundamentally different relational question. What does the whole system need for this intervention to actually take root and work?
Because you cannot just drop books into a vacuum and expect a systemic change. The diamond approach maps the interdependencies. It connects the learner to the teacher to the parent to the school leadership, the school to the community, and the community to the department.
It's all connected.
They are viewed not as separate silos, but as interdependent elements of one living, breathing organism.
What's fascinating about Becker's strategy is his framing. He notes that the Department of Basic Education is actually already trying to use the language of integration, future readiness, and public-private partnerships. They inherently know the isolated linear approach isn't solving the problems.
Right, they feel the friction.
So Becker's approach isn't to walk in aggressively and say, your entire system is a broken gray pyramid, tear it down. His strategy is to say, you are already recognizing the need for integrated systems. The diamond model is simply the visual and operational architecture for the reality you are already trying to build.
It is an incredibly sophisticated way to lower the institutional threat level. And the most practical, forward-looking expression of this partnership is a project referred to as Diamond Kids.
This is where it all comes together for the future. You don't transform a massive, entrenched system purely by fighting the adults who have spent their entire careers surviving in the gray diamond. You introduce a new visual and operational language to the next generation. The Diamond Kids Initiative teaches this continuous process thinking. Define, plan, develop, do, assess, reflect, learn, starting in childhood.
By teaching kids that assessment is not a final, terrifying judgment of their worth, but simply diagnostic feedback in the middle of a continuous process, you are effectively immunizing the next generation against the gray warrior trap. You are giving them the cognitive tools to navigate a quantum relational world with resilience rather than anxiety.
I do want to push back on the reality of implementation, though, on behalf of the leaders currently sitting at the top of these traditional structures.
Sure.
If this diamond model optimizes for distributed coherence rather than concentrated control at the top of a pyramid, how do you convince leaders who were deeply accustomed to gray diamond authority to let go of the reins? Does a hierarchy mean leadership ceases to exist?
It absolutely feels like a terrifying loss of control to someone whose entire identity is anchored in a Newtonian mindset. But the framework is clear. A hierarchy doesn't eliminate leadership, it elevates the nature of responsibility.
Elevates it. How?
In a diamond system, a leader's job shifts from micromanaging linear tasks and hoarding authority to maintaining the health and coherence of the cycle itself. You aren't dictating every step of the project. You are ensuring that awareness, anticipation, accountability, and adaptability are functioning across the whole network.
Oh, I see.
You are trading brittle, exhausting control for resilient, dynamic coherence.
That is a trade every leader should be desperate to make. Let's pull all these threads together. We have gone on an incredible journey today, starting with the realization that our linear Gantt chart mindset traps us in a flat, two-dimensional reality. We expose the danger of the gray diamond, the warrior trap of perpetual scarcity, emotional debt, and zero-sum competition.
We then explored the mechanics of escaping that trap by ascending to the red diamond of the athlete, embracing the continuous, friction-filled cycle of action, feedback, and active learning.
We looked at the profound shift of the green diamond, the statesperson, where mastery transforms into flow, vulnerability, and service to the system. And most crucially, we learned that the true human experience is a continuous upward spiral, fluctuating endlessly between the red and green states, pulled higher by the anticipation and awareness of the blue spirit.
It is a framework that fundamentally rewrites how we interpret both our successes and our struggles.
It really does. Before we wrap up, what is one final thought you want to leave the listener with as they process all of this?
We have seen that as individual human beings, we are biologically, psychologically, and structurally designed to continuously cycle between the red and green diamonds, learning, mastering, transitioning, and learning again. But look closely at our global macro institutions. Our educational systems, our economic policies, our massive corporate structures. By and large, they are desperately clinging to the gray diamond.
No, they really are.
They are trying to mandate rigid stability and absolute control in a highly relational world that demands continuous fluid adaptation. So here's the question to mull over. If our personal evolution, resilience, and happiness rely entirely on our willingness to constantly return to the athlete state, to humble ourselves and learn new rules, what would happen if our schools, our governments, and our economies found the courage to admit they needed to do the exact same thing?
What if the whole system admitted it was just an athlete stepping onto a completely new field? I love that. Remember, the next time you feel that overwhelming wave of panic and incompetence in a new situation, you haven't lost your edge. The machinery of your success isn't broken. You are just looking at a spiral instead of a straight line. You haven't fallen to the bottom. You are just starting level 2. Keep climbing your spire. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.